was reading up on the people I was going to be hanging out with, who were the Shuar people of the Ecuadorian Amazon. What I was struck by was that these were not poor people, but they had beautiful lives. And after a while living with them, I got very ill. I couldn't keep any food down. I was dying.
We live in a time when the old maps seem to be failing, and there's a deep collective ache to learn another way to live with one another. You just heard a slice of what's to come in today's conversation. Welcome. I'm David Achata. As an executive coach and author, I've spent my career helping people navigate change. But to go forward, we often have to look back. I created this season to explore how Indigenous wisdom can help us grow into the people our future needs. And whether you're looking for personal healing, better leadership, a deeper faith, or a new way to dream, I'm glad you're here. We're widening this circle this season to rediscover what it means to walk in a good way. So welcome to the How People Grow podcast season 6. Well, friends, thank you for being here. It's hard to believe this is our season finale. We have been in this series of what Indigenous wisdom could teach us for today for a few months now. And our guest today is John Perkins. I am so excited to have John here. We've been talking just a few minutes before the interview, and I said, I'm a professional question asker. And he said,
I'm a professional question answerer.
so we're going to be a good pair for today. John Perkins is a New York Times bestselling author. He wrote a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman, and many other books. One that was influential to me when I read called The World as You Dream It. And John's books have sold over 2.5 million copies and been translated into many languages. I think I read 35 languages.
38.
38 languages now. Man, amazing.
That we know of.
Right. So we're going to be talking today about this subject of how do we change our dreams? Because what I learned from one of John's books was that what we think is a dream is a nightmare for the rest of the world. And so could it be that we're actually living in a kind of nightmare and we don't even really know it? So John, thank you for making this time to allow me to interview you, and please tell us about who you are.
Well, thank you, David. I think you kind of covered the essentials. But I get started on this path really right out of college. I've spent 3 years in Ecuador, most of it deep in the Amazon rainforest as a Peace Corps volunteer. And it was interesting to me that I chose this path because I would have been drafted for Vietnam. I didn't believe in the Vietnam War. So
Okay.
it really didn't, I wasn't that excited about the Peace Corps, but uh, I did request the Amazon and it was given to me. And I was reading up on the people I was going to be hanging out with, who were the Shuar people of the Ecuadorian Amazon. And at the time, they were considered to be very primitive. They were hunters and gatherers. And according to the World Bank, they were amongst the poorest people in the world. They were way below the poverty line. So I wasn't sure what to expect, but eventually I end up with them. It was a very difficult journey to get there from the capital of Ecuador, Quito, and then to Cuenca, and then 3 days of very difficult travel on a rickety old wooden bus, and then a long hike deep through the jungle in the pouring rain most of the time.
Hmm.
But I finally get there, and um, what I was struck by was that these were not poor people.
Hmm.
They didn't have any currency. They didn't have any money, which is how we measure poverty. But they had beautiful lives. They were hunters and gatherers. They had plenty of food at that time, large territory. Now, this has changed in the years since that was 1968. Their territory has shrunk. They've created the problems that have been brought to them by the outside world, by us. But at that time, I realized, the United States government and its statistics are totally wrong. These people live in very happy family communities. They're prosperous people by any normal
Hmm.
human standards. So that was a very enlightening experience. And after a while living with them, I got very ill. I couldn't keep any food down. I was dying. I couldn't get off the floor. I had a sleeping bag and I was on the dirt floor of one of their houses and I couldn't even stand up. I was losing a lot of weight very quickly. Really was I was I'd reconciled myself with dying.
Hmm.
And then late one afternoon, the school teacher, who was one of the few people I could communicate with, because the Peace Corps had spent 8 weeks teaching me Spanish, which isn't a lot of time to learn language. But I could get along in Spanish. But now I'm with people who don't speak Spanish.
Right.
So another lesson in U.S. government work is they teach you a language and then send you someplace where nobody speaks that, except the school teacher. So.
Right.
So the school teacher comes up to me late one afternoon with this little old man. Well, he looked very large. I'm lying on the floor looking up at him. Later, I discovered he was pretty tiny, but he was scary looking. He's basically naked except for a loincloth, covered with tattoos. And the school teacher says, "This guy's a shaman." And I'm like, oh, well, what's a shaman? This is
Hmm.
1960. I'd graduated from business school. I had no idea what a shaman was. And he said, well, he can heal you. And
Hmm.
that got my attention because at this point, there's no way I could walk. I could get out of the jungle, take this 3-day journey, very difficult hike through the jungle, and then a bus ride, if I could find a bus, up to a medical facility. I couldn't get off the floor. So resigned to dying, this guy comes along and says he can heal me. Okay. So next thing I know, that night I'm carried into his lodge and laid down on a bench, and he comes in. There's actually very little light, and there's a fire that's gone down to embers, so it's very dark. But he comes in and he stands by the fire, and he looks really scary now because in addition to the black tattoos, he's now got red paint all over him,
Oh.
and and he's making these strange noises, which are actually chants, but they were sounded very strange to me. And then he sits down on a stool next to my bench, and he starts pouring this liquid into this little out of the big gourd into a little kind of spoon-like gourd, and he hands it to me, and the interpreter, the school teacher sitting next to me, and he says, drink this, all of it. And oh, before he does this, he's chanting into this and spitting into it.
Oh. What is your going on in your mind when this is
Boy,
happening?
my mind at this point is so shot. I don't give a damn. I don't. I'm resigned to dying, and
Wow.
I'll try anything. And so I'm kind of interested, but I'm really out of it too. I was very weak. So he gives it to me and says, drink it, all of it, fast. So I do, and I'm lying there on the bench, and I start to have these odd feelings, and I feel like I have to vomit.
Hmm.
I start to vomit, but I can't, don't have any food in me. I haven't eaten in a
Hmm.
number of days.
Right.
But what happens is I look down as I hang over the bench and I look down and all these snakes are coming out of my mouth. I've got
Hmm.
dry heaves, but these snakes are coming out.
Oh.
They hit the ground and they turn into roots, and the roots go out along and they turn into trees.
Hmm.
So this is really pretty interesting.
Wow.
And then at one point I've got my eyes closed, and the shaman I've settled back now, and I'm sort of I've given into this thing. I've surrendered, and I've got my eyes closed, and the shaman through the translator says, "Touch the jaguar."
Hmm.
And I open my eyes and I look around. I'm in the middle of the jungle in the middle of the night, and I know there's jaguars out there. I've heard them. I haven't seen one, but I've heard them. I've seen their huge footprint. And I'm like, oh no, where's the jaguar? This is funny. Now it wasn't very funny at the time, but and the shaman says, no, 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 close your eyes and see a vision of a jaguar and
Hmm.
touch it.
Hmm.
And it happens, and I see a jaguar and I touch it, and as I do so, I I hear a voice, like my mother's voice, saying, "Son, the food and drink will kill you." Well, the people of this region of the Amazon and much of the Amazon area don't drink water out of the rivers because they know the rivers have organic matter, dead trees, dead animals. They can't drink it. So the women make a drink, a kind of a beer called chicha. And by chewing manioc root and spitting it, and saliva, as it turns out, sets up a fermentation process,
Mm.
sort of like yeast. And you get a kind of a beer that's alcoholic. And then you can add water to that, and it's safe to drink. And they know this. So I've been drinking a lot of chicha because you got to stay hydrated. I knew I needed to stay hydrated, and there wasn't any Perrier. There was and they also, when I was eating, they eat some very strange food. You know, a delicacy is white grubs that you pull out of a dead log and eat them live.
Mm.
And so I mean, you know, but there weren't any Cliff Bars. So I'm eating a lot of squirming white grubs and drinking a lot of spit beer. And I realize that every time I'm doing this, I'm hearing a voice in my head saying it'll kill you.
Mm.
You know, I did
Mm.
it.
Mm.
I'm scared of it. At the same time, I see how incredibly healthy and robust the Shuar are. The men are all built like Tarzan. You know,
Yeah.
they killed a wild boar in the jungle and carried it on their shoulders, a big, heavy wild boar for several miles through thick jungle. And the women look. I was a young man. The women look good, and people look to be very old if they didn't die of a hunting accident or in childbirth. So I realized that at that point, it's not the food and drink killing me because it doesn't kill them. It's my mindset.
Mm.
It's my
Mm.
perception.
Mm.
And the next morning, I felt much better, and I'm starting to eat. And a day or two later, the shaman comes up to me and he says, "You're okay now." And "Yeah, I mean, I'm good." And he says, "You know, you owe me." Well,
Mm.
what am I going to do? They don't use money out here. That's your bananas for my papayas, and I don't
Right.
have any bananas or papayas. And he
Right.
says, "You may need to become my apprentice."
Mm.
Well, I graduated from business school. I had no desire to be a shaman's apprentice. In those days, David, there was no future in shamanism. You know,
Mm.
nobody
Mhm.
knew what it was. Things have changed.
Yeah.
But the guy saved my life. So I spent the next year or so becoming his apprentice
Yeah.
and learning about ayahuasca because that's the drink he'd given me, which I'd never, of course, heard of before,
Mm.
and learning a lot of other things. And one of the most important things was touching the jaguar, which is the title of one of my recent books.
Mm.
Um, so he said, you know, when you've got something blocking you, when there's something that's holding you back from whatever it is, in this case, health, but it could be anything in life, when there's something holding you back, see it as a jaguar on the trail, and if you run from it, it'll chase you. But if you reach out and touch it, it's a sacred animal. It'll give
Mm.
you power. It'll
Mm.
give you what they call a rutum, spirit of the forest, spirit of life, and uh, and it'll help you change your perception. Because he said, and this was incredible. This was a guy who we consider illiterate. He said, you know, your dreams, your perception. And when they're a dream culture, they honor their nighttime dreams, but they also see dreams as a much bigger thing. So your perceptions mold reality. Wow. You know, and when you start thinking about this, I realized there's no Ecuador, there's no United States, there are no corporations, there's no religion. There's nothing basically that we humans do or believe in that didn't come from perception.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
know, we first perceive something and then we take actions to make it happen, and that changes reality.
Mm.
And so this was very profound. And that, in essence, is what had happened. I realized I had had a perception that the food and drink was killing me, so it was.
Yeah.
I changed my perception, and suddenly I get healthy.
Mm.
Very profound teaching.
Yeah.
It stuck with me ever since.
Yeah, John, that is when I read some of this story in your book, The World You Dream It, I had to pause for a second and underline some things about how it's really our beliefs about the world that are making the problems for us.
Mm.
And what was profound to me in the story you just shared was, in a way, you kind of threw those up, in a sort of a mystical, spiritual way through ayahuasca. And what's fascinating to me about this series of conversations, I've encountered a number of people who have brought up the topic of ayahuasca. And it sounds like from your story that that was really a key turning point in changing how you saw the world. And would you say that's accurate? Was that a key turning point for you?
Well, it definitely was, but and I've had many other key turning points, or a number of others that got me out. So when when I came back to the United States after the Peace Corps, I did what I'd been trained to do in business school. Became an economist, and very quickly chief economist at a major consulting firm, and I became what we call an economic hitman, which is another whole story. And I got out of that business by having another incredible experience. It had nothing to do with ayahuasca. It was just a visualization in nature. And I teach courses. I've taught over the years many courses on shamanism and taken people on journeys, shamanic journeys. So, yeah, plants like ayahuasca, San Pedro, tobacco, there's many of them that are used by different cultures, can have a profound impact. But we can also get that profound impact without those
Hmm.
plants. It's so, but I do think that the plant world is speaking to us in many ways. People are becoming vegetarians, or at least are eating less meat, and I'm included, and I'm a vegetarian now, and very much we buy into organic foods, we buy into organic medicines and creams and things like that. There are many stores that, are based on organic plant items.
Yeah.
So the plant world is speaking to us. And the fact that ayahuasca is becoming so well known around the world these days, which it wasn't, a few years ago, and certainly not when I first took it. I think that's important, but it's also really important for people to understand you don't have to take ayahuasca to have these kinds of
Yeah.
experiences. Meditation does it, yoga can do it. There's all kinds of avenues and entry points into
Hmm.
changing perception. The main thing is to really touch that jaguar, to understand that it's all about perception. There was a
Hmm.
time I didn't believe I was a good writer because I had an English teacher that was very critical of my writing. But then I realized that that was just a perception.
Yeah.
And it's this whole perception thing is so powerful.
Will you take us on a little journey with, and obviously we don't have time for all the chapters. I think are you in your 80s now?
Yes, I'm 81.
Okay, so yeah, we definitely don't have time for all the chapters, but we have time for some key ones. And will you take us on a journey of the shifts in your perception? You shared one, and I know a little bit of your story that you'd gone to business school, you were in the Peace Corps, that's how you ended up in South America, but then you ended up going to the business world and doing this work that you're describing. And so you'd had this experience where you had spent this time with this shaman who had taught you about your perception and changing that. But yet you went back to the Western world and you had to work, and that was your path. How did that experience stick with you that eventually would lead you out of the business world?
Yeah. Well, and let me just mention I'm 81. I just came back from very, very deep in the Amazon, where I led a documentary film crew. I'm in great shape. And part of that, this morning I just came from swimming laps, and part of that is a perception. I know a
Mm,
lot of people who are in their mid 60s that are a lot older than me.
Yeah.
because they have a perception. Oh, I'm just an old person. I'm a grandfather. Like some of them, there's a club on this island called the Geezers Club. I wouldn't think of joining that. I wouldn't think of considering myself an old geezer. I'm not an old geezer. I love to dance every Wednesday night. We had this wind down Wednesday at this winery with live music. And there's two guys that like to dance. I'm one of them, and half a dozen women who love to dance. And my partner, she's not a jealous person, so I end up dancing all the time with a lot of very remarkable women, most of whom are 20 or plus years younger than me, and I
Wow.
outdance them. So I
Nice.
just want, but it's all about perception as far as I'm concerned. And yes, the physical things. I've been
Mm.
lucky, but my knees haven't given out or yet. I think a lot of that is the perception too of getting the right amount of exercise and diet. So I just really wanted to point that out that
Mm.
yes, I'm 81. What the hell does that mean?
Yeah. Right.
So um, your question. So
Your
okay,
perception.
so how did I get out of the business world?
Yeah, like how did this event kind of stick
Uh,
with you and make you say, I don't think this is for me?
well, so my job as an economic hitman, or I was chief economist at this major consulting firm. I was doing what business school had taught me to do in the World Bank, what I believed was right for many years, which was locating countries that had resources our corporations want, like oil. Poor countries that had oil, like Ecuador was one of them. I ended up going back to Ecuador and Indonesia and many others. And we'd arrange huge loans to those countries that had to be used to hire our corporations to build big infrastructure projects in those countries, power plants, highways, ports, airports, things that benefited a few wealthy families in those countries, who are the ones who owned the industries and the commercial establishment and the banks, but ultimately took the country deep into debt that it couldn't repay. So we'd go back, usually under the guise of the International Monetary Fund, and say, hey, you owe us money, so your collateral is your oil or whatever the resource was. Sell your oil real cheap to our corporations without environmental or social regulations. Uh, Let us build a military base on your soil. Vote with us on the next United Nations vote against Cuba or
Mm.
China or whatever. So in that way, we were building this American corporate empire. And but the statistics show that when you make these investments, the economy grows in that country. And it does. The GDP grows. Um, but what the statistics don't show is that GDP is really a measure of how well the wealthy are doing in the corporations.
Mm.
People like the Schwa aren't even included in the
Yeah.
GDP. And most of, it's totally biased toward the rich. But I didn't get that for a long time. And then I saw that's all a perception. It's like when I was told that the Schwa were below the poverty line, and what I found was prosperous people.
Mm.
It was a lie. Statistics lie.
Mm.
And I was using these statistics to lie, to bring money to our big corporations. So the World Bank would loan money to Ecuador, let's say. Ecuador would never see the money. The money would just go from a bank in Washington, the World Bank, to a bank, let's say, in San Francisco, to Bechtel Corporation, to build a big project in Ecuador, as an example. And what we were saying is that the country benefits, but only a few wealthy people in the country benefited. The big beneficiaries were our corporations that made huge profits, and the people that we collaborated with in these countries, that our agribusinesses and others collaborated with. But it took me a long time to figure that out. And the head of state of Panama, Omar Torrijos, helped me understand that. But once I understood it, David, I didn't want to believe it.
Mm.
I was operating under this false perception. I was lying. I was being lied to. I was lying to the world. I was lying to myself. And I was making a lot of money. And I was traveling first class around the world. I came from a teacher's family in New Hampshire. We never had a lot of money. I never traveled. My dad taught in a boys' private school, very wealthy boys who traveled all the time, that I grew up with, but I never did. And now I'm doing what I always dreamed of doing. I thought
Yeah.
this is a dream. And
Mm.
so once I realized that what I was doing was the wrong thing, I had a hard time getting out. Plus, there was a lot of pressure on me not to get out. And then I took a little vacation and rented a small sailboat in the Caribbean, in the Virgin Islands. And one afternoon, I'm anchored off St. John Island, and I row the dinghy ashore, and I climb up to this old sugarcane plantation, the ruins of an old sugarcane plantation. It was beautiful. It was idyllic. I'm looking out at the sun setting over the Caribbean. I've got a couple of cans of beer with me, and and there's beautiful flowers, bougainvillea all over the place, all over these ruins. And I thought, man, this is the life. And then I went into this kind of trance. I think I went back into something similar.
Hmm.
I'd been practicing some forms of meditation and so on. But in this trance state, I saw that this sugar plantation was built on the bones of thousands of African slaves. And then I saw that the whole hemisphere is built on the bones of not just African slaves, but indigenous slaves from, millions, millions. This hemisphere is built on millions of slaves. And then I had to admit that I too was a slaver. I
Hmm.
was enslaving countries in debt and people in debt. Different, but nonetheless a form of slavery. And as I'm sitting there, I'm suddenly having this amazing enlightenment. It's been building up to that, but as I said, talking to this head of state of Panama, there'd been this building, but I resisted it. Suddenly, I'm like, I'm going to touch that jaguar, and I did. And the basically what I got was get the hell out.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
And I went back to my headquarters in Boston and went into the president of my company and quit.
Hmm.
So it was a very important moment. And it was again going into that space where you suddenly see, my God, the perceptions I've been living under are not good ones. And the
Yeah.
other thing I saw was I was not happy. Yes, I was realizing what I thought was the American dream, lots of money, traveling first class around the world, wining and dining with heads of state in the finest restaurant, and beautiful women. I mean, I had there was a lot of that going on
Hmm.
at this job, and it's like, yeah, this is my dream. And then at the same time, when I'm having this vision of that I'm lying to myself and everybody else, I also realized that I wasn't happy.
Hmm.
I was pretty much living on Valium and alcohol.
Wow.
At one point, I flew from Boston, where our headquarters were, to Indonesia 12 times in 3 months, and bad jet lag. And I would, at night I would take Valium and alcohol to sleep, and in the morning I'd have to get up and pump myself with caffeine
Yeah.
in order to function, and then go in and negotiate huge financial deals
Yeah.
in
Right.
Indonesia for the World Bank. And I realized I wasn't happy.
Hmm.
There was this perception of the American dream was a false perception for me.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
a magnificent awakening.
Yeah. You are describing a definite nightmare. It's like a video camera we're showing young John Perkins.
Mm.
There's work like crazy, party, have a good time, consume, take pills to go to sleep, amp yourself up with caffeine to wake up. It sounds utterly exhausting. And I've lived my own version of that, not quite that intense, but just the fast-paced life on a plane. And it like your body can only endure so much until it says, I don't like this. We don't like the way you've been treating us, John Perkins. You've got to stop it. And you're mentioning these concepts I'd like to dig into a little bit more about shamanism, touching the jaguar. These are all concepts that might be foreign to a lot of people listening. And I wonder if you could help us understand how your experiences with indigenous peoples and even some of these key worldview pieces like touching the jaguar have been able to help you understand how do we go in and we change our beliefs about what reality should be like.
That's a great question. Um, so finally, during the 90s, beginning in the late 80s, I began writing books about shamanism. There's a whole story behind that, which is in a number of my books about how I tried to write what became Confessions of an Economic Hitman. I tried to expose the system I had been in, and I get threatening phone calls because I reached out to other people who had jobs like mine.
Hmm. Yeah.
People we call the jackals, who are CIA assets that step in. If economic hitmen fail to convince a president to play our game, the president knows that he's likely to be overthrown in a coup or even
Hmm.
assassinated by people
Hmm.
we call jackals. And so I start reaching out to these people to include in this book. And I get threatening phone calls, threatening my life and my infant daughters. This is back in the 80s. And at the same time, I get taken out to dinner by the president of Stone and Webster Engineering Corporation, which had been a rival of my company's. And he says, you know, you got a great resume, you can, chief economist, we'd like to use it in proposals. You don't have to do any work for us. Just let us use your resume and proposals, and I'm prepared to write you a check for $500,000 tomorrow. This is in the
Hmm.
late 80s. Half a million is nothing to sneeze at today,
Yeah.
but
Right.
back then it was even more. He said, Just don't write that book. We know you're writing. You can't have this job and write that book."
Hmm.
So I'm actually getting what I'd been giving presidents of countries, like, "Oh, over here I have a fortune for you and your family, and you know, you and your friends who own the industries are going to benefit from all this infrastructure. But if you decide not to do that, over here I got a gun.
Hmm. Right. Hmm.
Cool. I didn't carry a gun, but the president knew there were people behind me that did.
Yeah.
And now I'm getting the same thing. My life's being threatened, and I'm being offered a bribe, which is a way out. It's a legal bribe, completely
Yeah.
legal, not to pay a consultant's fee to use his resume. So I take the money. And then, you know, my own defense, I don't go out and buy a fancy yacht or big house or something. I put the money into going back to the Amazon, back to the Shuar people,
Hmm.
and writing and telling them, I want to help you save your rainforest. I know the forests are under attack. You saved my life years ago. I want to help you now. And I ended up, you know, writing 5 books on shamanism. You've mentioned one of them, The World is As You Dream It. There was psychonavigation and shapeshifting and others. Because I was fine with Stone and Webster. That was fine with these people as long as they didn't write about being an economic hitman. And then I was in the Amazon with a group of people. I was taking people in to learn from the Schwa people who really wanted to learn about changing the dream. The Schwa had invited me to bring those kind of people in to learn from them. I still do that. I just got back from doing that 2 weeks ago uh,
Hmm.
in the Ecuadorian Amazon. I took a group. And so I'm in there, I'm in the Amazon with a group of people on 9/11. And when I come home, I fly up to ground zero. And I suddenly know that I have to write about what I've experienced. And, you know, I decided at that moment that I would not contact anyone else. I would write it in secret. I would write a confession, a personal confession rather than an expose. And I wouldn't tell anybody I was writing it until I got it in the hands of a good New York agent and out to the publishing world. And then I figured it was my insurance policy.
Hmm.
Because at that point, anybody who wanted me to stop speaking out knew that if they killed me or if I died mysteriously, the book would sell lots more
Hmm.
copies,
Right.
even than it did, which has turned out were a lot, but we didn't know that at the time.
Hmm.
So it was another moment of deep enlightenment of 9/11. This triggered this in me that I had to write about that. And I think I've gone a long way off the question you asked me, which I don't even remember anymore.
Well, I mean, it's important backstory. The question was, and how did you come to the place where you learned how to change what you thought your world should look like
Uh,
and other people's? But let me insert one more thing. The reason I was really enjoying you sharing some of this was because I think it highlights the gentleman offering you $500,000 also had a dream of what reality should look like, and he was willing to sacrifice his money for it. You also still at that point had a dream of what you thought reality should look like. And you did your best with the knowledge you had and the experience you have to that point, but you did come to a place where you said, I have to do something about what I know. And so I want to hear a little bit more about how did your reality shift based on what you learned from some of those traditional healers? And there's so many questions connected to it, but I think the broadest one is in how can we learn from what you learned on how we change our dreams? Because not everybody's going to go into the jungle, but we can learn from what you learned in the jungle. And so that's kind of where I'm trying to get to.
Hmm. So at the point at 9/11, after 9/11, when I'm at ground zero, I realized that if I wanted to help to transform the world that I had helped to create as an economic hitman, what we economic hitman really had done is create a world a global economic system that I call a death economy that's based on maximizing materialism and short-term profits. And it's created this death economy that's polluting and consuming itself toward extinction, toward destruction. And that is really what 9/11 represented to me is that, the fact that somebody was pissed off at the United States and has chosen to hit the World Trade Center. I mean,
Hmm.
that's a sign of our economy. That's
Yeah.
what I was feeling like. That's what
Mm.
they did. They struck out against the death economy. And I'm not justifying all what they did, but it triggered in me this idea, well, we've got to create a life economy. I've got to use what I learned to turn these things around, and it's all about perception. So uh, I'm going to stop. I've been teaching shamanism. I've been training people. I've done intensive training of people for the several months, and I was teaching shamanism, and I decided that now the shamanism I needed to use was in the corporate world. I needed to write books. I needed to expose this death economy and try to inspire people to turn it into a life economy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all perception. The death economy is based on the perception of the goal is to maximize materialism, consumption, and short-term profits for corporations. The life economy is based on a goal of maximizing long-term benefits for all life, not just
Mm.
humans, but all life.
Yeah.
And throughout most of the 200,000 years plus that we've seen ourselves as human beings, we've lived in life economies. The Shwa, the Atwa, the people in the jungle still live in a life economy. And that's an economic system that's circular, there's basically no waste. You're not destroying the environment. So, how do we transform this death economy to a life economy? It's all about perception. What is the goal? It shouldn't be about maximizing materialistic consumption and short-term profits. It's about maximizing the benefits of life, maximizing, life. And so if we want to put that in practical terms, it's about paying people to clean up pollution,
Mm.
to develop methods for going out into the ocean and corralling all the plastics that's out in the oceans
Yeah.
and recycling it. It's about paying people to fill in old pit mines and make them productive, to rejuvenate destroyed environments, recycle. It's about new technologies like we're coming up with. It may be about AI. How do we apply
Mm.
AI
Yeah.
to really driving us toward making the world a place that our great grandchildren will want to
Mm.
inherit? So that's the life economy. So now suddenly I'm like, okay, um, everything I learned as an economic hitman can be turned around. And I learned it to create a death economy, but now I've got to apply that to creating a life economy and to encouraging people to get into that. So I started writing books no longer about that form of shamanism directly, but about a new form of shamanism. I don't call it that, but about transforming. And since then, I've written, let's see, 5 books. I've got a new one coming out this September, which is called The Art of the Steal,
Mm.
which is
Yeah.
about it's about how we've really created an economic hitman presidency in the United States and in many other countries. And and it's not about Trump per se, he's in it, but it's really about the system that we've created and how we need to move beyond that, and about what individuals can do to change it. And
Mm.
maybe that's where we should go at this point, into the individuals, if you want to, whatever you want. But yeah, what?
Yeah, I do want to go there. I want to have you explain something you said earlier, though, because I think it might be derailing to someone listening who doesn't really understand this word, even shamanism. You're describing this in terms of in two ways, like something that you learned in Ecuador, but then also something you're applying in the business world, but you're not using that word. So, how would you describe what that word means and how it is that you're using the principles there?
Well, the short definition of a shaman that I like is a man or a woman who journeys to other worlds, like I do with, can be a meditation or whatever, but we all do it all the time. It's where do thoughts come from? You know,
Hmm.
where are our thoughts coming from right now? As a writer, I know that, where are my thoughts coming from? I don't know, but they're coming from someplace.
Hmm.
So a shaman journeys into that sphere of just opening, uh, being open to the messages, and then using what he or she learns on this shamanic journey. Let's call it that. It doesn't have to be anything nearly this complex as what we might think of as a shamanic journey. Uh, to use that information, energy, and wisdom to affect change in this world. So lots of people journey to other worlds, like I said, yogis, meditators, prayer is a journey to other worlds. The thought process is a journey to other worlds. So where's this information coming from?
Mm. Right.
Uh, but the shaman always uses it to affect change in this world on someone else or something else. And so shamans can be healers, helping another person, as the shaman did with me. But it may be also looking at what do we do if the river starts to rise? What do we move our village? The shaman goes into, what do we do? And it can be so in a way, business is all about that same policy, that same approach. Like sharp businessmen come up with an idea, an entrepreneur comes up with an idea. Where is it from? I don't know, but they have to take the actions to turn it into reality.
Yeah.
You have the perception, oh my gosh, as Thomas Edison once time said, his most important part of his laboratory is a little cot where he took in what this guides will tell you was a nap for 20 to 30 minutes every day. He said he wasn't napping, he was going into a meditation. And he said, I didn't invent the light bulb. The idea was always out there.
Mm.
I just grabbed the idea, and then I had to do about 1,000 experiments to see what filament worked
Hmm.
in a vacuum tube.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's that concept, and that's what business all is. It's the idea, and then it's convincing other people. Oh, like I get the idea that I want to make these shirts and sell millions of them. So
Hmm.
now I've got to convince the world, if you don't wear one of these shirts, you're not going to be successful. You're not going to be
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah.
Buy this shirt from me, and,
Hmm.
and you'll have it made for the rest of your life. Perception, 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 perception. And we have this perception that what we're doing is making the world better for us. Uh, you know, consumption, pollution is somehow good.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's become even more apparent in the last few years under these recent administrations in Washington. But we know that's a false perception. Most of us really, really get it.
Yeah.
We, we're sending the world into crisis with this
Mm.
model that we have. So
Yeah.
we get a perception.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've devoted the last, 30 years to,
Mm.
since I started really thinking about this, and particularly after 9/11.
Yeah.
That the new perception is one that we must create a life economy. And I'm
Mm.
not talking about people living in caves. I'm talking about people living better lives that are more meaningful and doing jobs that help to benefit the earth rather than ravaging it.
Yeah.
They're out there.
Thank.
We've been moving in that direction. You know, electric cars and solar and wind and all these things are moving in that direction.
Uh-huh. Some people may not be familiar with this, John. I know that you have co-founded the Pachamama Alliance, and I'd like to hear a tad about that, but would you share in as shorthand form as you can, what does Pachamama mean, and what is the Pachamama prophecy, and how has that shaped the work that you are giving yourself to?
Well, Pachamama is a Quechua word from, you know, a language that's been spoken by lots of people in the Andes. And Pacha means, it means the earth, the universe, and time. It's a very broad concept. So Pachamama is mother, earth, universe, everything, basically, our mother, everything. It's almost like you could conceive of God, you know, if you wanted to put that, but and so the Pachamama Alliance is an organization, a nonprofit that Bill and Lynn Twist and I founded 30 years ago. We're celebrating our 30th anniversary. And it was at the request of the people in the Amazon, the Shwa and the Achwa, people who I've been hanging out with all these years, who wanted us to help them form an alliance that would save their forests and save their way of life. And they said, you know, originally we thought the problem was the oil companies, the economic hitman. And what we've really understood is that that's a symptom. The real problem is the dream of the modern world, your dream
Mm,
of materialism, your dream
yeah.
of
Mm,
maximizing short-term profits, the very things I talked about. We realize that the only way we're going to save our forests is to help you guys change your dream of
yeah.
what it means to be successful.
Right.
And so we formed this nonprofit organization that has two different branches, really. One is to be on the ground, to hire lawyers and people to help stop the destruction of the rainforest. One of the things we did was create a new constitution in Ecuador, which now has been adopted in other countries, giving rights of nature, which means that nature has the right to defend itself in
Mm,
court.
hmm.
The other side is to work around the world with programs we call the Awakening the Dreamer programs, to change the dream of the modern world.
Yeah, that's beautiful. The Pachamama prophecy. Will you share what that is?
Well, I think you're talking about the eagle and the condor prophecy.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, nobody knows where this prophecy started. Probably in the Amazon. It moved up through the Andes many thousands of years ago. We don't know when exactly. It was oral tradition. But a long, long time ago, people said back in the mists of history, the cultures decided to take two different routes, fly in two different skies. One was the route of the condor, which it said is the root of the hearts, the root of people who believe that they are a part of nature because the condor is a bird that cleans up. It's a scavenger. It doesn't kill anything. It cleans up trash, basically. And the other root would be the root of the eagle, which is the people of the world who come more from the idea that they believe that they are a part from nature, the industrialized world, the scientific world. And they said these two uh, birds would, uh, parts of humanity would go in different directions for many years. And then it was said that during the fourth Pachacuti, a Pachacuti is a 500-year interval. The fourth Pachacuti, which dates back in our calendar to about 1500, they said the two would come together and clash, and the eagle would be so strong as to practically drive the condor into extinction, but not quite. And we know that's what happened. 1492, Columbus, the industrialized world, the world that thought it could dominate nature, went out and practically drove the indigenous communities around the world into extinction, but not quite. The prophecy says that 500 years later, in the fifth Pachacuti, roughly the year 2000, the opportunity would arise for the two to come together and dance and
Hmm.
move in one sky, mate, and create a new a new entity, which would be higher consciousness, the
Hmm.
recognition that these two must come together. And of course, we've seen that happening. So around the 1990s, but when I'm starting writing the books on shamanism, people are suddenly getting interested in shamanism. And the shamans are interested in sharing their knowledge with us.
Yeah.
They're open to that. And so we've been seeing that happening.
Mm.
And I think,
Mm-hmm.
we've also seen setbacks. Like right now, we're going through a major setback under
Mm-hmm.
the Trump administration, where we're moving away from that. But this is temporary.
Mm.
I think we're on an overall projectile that takes us um, toward increasingly toward the life economy, which is an economic system that brings these two together.
Mm. Thanks for sharing that backstory so that we know.
Hey, Kimon,
Yeah,
oh, sorry.
I'm still here.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there. Okay,
I
we
lost
go.
your camera, but I can still see you. It's all right.
There
We can edit this little
we
section
got
out. There
it.
you are. Um, but yeah, thanks, John, for sharing that because it helps us know what's motivating you. And I know that you've continued to write, and you mentioned a new project that you're working on. Share with us about the new project and why you think it's important right now for us to be paying attention.
Yeah, I think we've been hit by a two by four, which is waking us up. And I want to make it clear that so this book I'm writing called The Art of the Steal, Trump and the Economic Hitman Presidency, is not a partisan book, and it's not by any means just about Trump. Every president since Eisenhower, Republican and Democrat, have used economic hitmen like me. But we've entered a time now where we have a president who embraces being an economic hitman, really.
Hmm.
And it's not just in this country. China's got the same kind of head of state, and so does Russia, and so does Hungary, and so do a lot of other countries. Uh, and so we've been moving in that direction of people sort of the pushback against the life economy. That the idea that you get woke people are not good. Well, who the hell doesn't want to be awake? I mean, I don't get that. What, want to be asleep and in a trance? Yeah, I guess that's what they want us to
Hmm.
be. And that's an economic hitman's technique. Yeah, we want to put people in a trance that all you want is more money pouring into your country, more electricity, even if it
Yeah.
puts your country deep into debt. No one really benefits except the rich. And so we are being right now really, really struck, hit over the head with this two by four that says you got to change, you know? And I think that's a great gift that Trump has given us, frankly, is to wake us up this
Hmm.
way.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think it's happening. And it's not, again, it's not just Trump. It's happening in many, many other countries too.
Hmm.
And it's been a system that's been growing. Biden was deeply involved in it. And every, as I said, every Democratic and Republican president, it's just that this one has taken it to a new level where he himself has embraced what I call the four pillars of the economic hitman strategy, which are fear, debt, anxiety over scarcity, and divide and conquer. Those are part of the strategy I used and economic hitmen have used throughout history. And Trump has deeply, deeply embraced these. So the
Yeah.
book goes into that, but it's much more than that. And in the end, it's about how does each of us as an individual relate to these four pillars and use them to create a life economy.
Hmm. What's fascinating hearing you share about the new project is on the surface. I love how you said this isn't really a partisan conversation. This is more of a book about these principles that are at play. And what's fascinating listening to you share those principles is how they're rooted in what form our perceptions are rooted in our attachment to these things. You said four: fear, debt, and what were the other two?
Anxiety over scarcity, believing that there's never enough. I don't have enough. Elon Musk doesn't believe he has enough. He has
Right.
to get a 400 billion or whatever he's currently got. He needs to have a trillion. He needs to break the trillion mark.
Yeah.
Scarcity believes he's got scarcity. It's ridiculous.
Hmm.
And divide and conquer is the fourth one. So, pitting people against each other like we're doing with immigration and with so many things right now where we're pitting people against each other. And basically that says the system's not the problem. We're not the problem. They're the problem. It's them.
Yeah.
If we just stop them from coming into the country, if we could just
Hmm.
if we could just get the Russians and the Chinese to live like we live, it would all be okay. But it wouldn't be. But these things stop us from really looking at the real issue, from really touching that jaguar.
Hmm.
We run
Hmm.
from the jaguar. We run and it chases us and chases us.
Hmm. And I've heard you come back so many times to this theme that came up for you in this vision that you had in the late 60s. It's interesting how it's become such a part of who John Perkins is now. And in our last moments, I want to ask you to break out some sage wisdom for us. And do your best, okay? I know you got some. And the sage wisdom, though, has to do with this phrase that you've come back to, which is touch the jaguar. Let's make believe that you're sitting with somebody who still does not quite even understand what this means and wants you to help them figure out, how do I face my fears? How do I change my perception? And help me learn the best of what you have learned so that I too can change my perception. How would you guide them?
Well, in this new book I have comes to the end that goes into that in much detail in the conclusion section. But I think you can almost summarize it by saying you ask yourself five questions. And the first is, what do I most want to do for the rest of my life?
Hmm.
Because, if we ask people to do things they don't want to do, ultimately it's going to fail at one level or another. So for me, I would answer, I want to write. I love to write. I really love to write. And I have a friend who's kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum. He's a carpenter. He wants to work with his hands in wood for the rest of his life. He loves doing that. The second question is, what's stopping me? What's the blockage? What's the jaguar standing in my path that's
Hmm.
stopping me?
Hmm.
And for me, I might say, well, I just don't have enough time uh, to write. I know I need to write for at least an hour or two every day to be a successful writer. I don't have time for that. And for my carpenter friend, it's like, well, my clients don't want to pay the extra price for me to uh, wait a minute. I backed off a little bit here. What do I most want to do for the rest of my life?
Hmm.
The second question is,
Yeah.
how do I do that in a way that creates a life economy?
Okay.
For
Good.
me, I would say I write about things with the intent of inspiring people to move into a life economy. My carpenter friend would say, well, I'm only going to use sustainable materials and I'm going to replant trees for every tree, a tree for every tree that my wood consumes.
Hmm.
Third question is what's stopping me? What's the jaguar
Yes.
standing in my path?
Yeah.
And for me, it might be, well, I don't have enough time to spend on writing. And my carpenter friend would say, well, my clients don't want to pay the extra uh, cost that it takes for me to plant trees or use sustainable materials. And then the fourth question is, when I touch that jaguar, how does it change my perception? And for me, I might say, well, wait, I could turn off the television for 2 hours every night or get up a little bit earlier and write. And for my carpenter friend, for my carpenter friend, he'd say, well, I can tell my clients that the extra price is not a cost, it's an investment in the future.
Hmm. Hmm. It's good.
Take that Jaguar and it changes your perception. And the fifth question is, what actions do I take right
Hmm.
now immediately? And so for me, it's like, okay, I got to take that time. I'll turn off the television and write. Got to write. My carpenter friend, well, I've got to start making cabinets like this one out of sustainable materials and tell my clients that's what I'm doing.
Hmm.
And David, the first two questions may remain the same forever or for a long period of time. What do I most want to do for the rest of my life? And how do I do that in a way that creates a life economy that helps to transform
Yeah.
the to a life economy? It makes the world a better place. Those two questions may stay the same, but the other three will frequently change. What's standing in my path? Okay, I've decided I'm going to take 2 hours and write every day, but now the question is, what am I going to write about? And then
Right.
once I decide that, it's which person do I use? Am I writing first person or third person? Am I writing an essay or am I writing a novel? And then the next question is, where do I start? What's the
Mm.
title? What's the first sentence? What's the second sentence?
Yeah.
And you go through that process. Well, what's keeping me from believing that I can do this? What's keeping me from understanding what kind of a book I want to write, and so on. And then, the actions you take will change every day. So I actually recommend to people, every morning wake up with this, or every couple of mornings wake up while you're still lying in bed. You can go through this whole process in less than a minute if you
Mm.
once you're used to it. Just lie there and ask yourself, what do I most want to do today?
Yeah.
How do I do that in a
Mm.
way that's going to make the world a better place?
Mm.
And what's stopping me from doing that? And when I change my perception, how do I get around that? How,
Mm.
how does it take me around what
Yeah.
I can?
That's a beautiful overview to help us see, coming back to what we were talking about today, is how do we change our dreams? And these
Yeah.
are great ways for us to all reflect and think about, what am I carrying around? How do I face it? How do I touch that jaguar that you described?
And we
And
can each take a different path. Each
mm,
one has to do, I like to write. You've
yeah,
got a podcast and you've got another career that you do. And we can all take different paths, but if we're heading for that same destination of the life economy, we'll get there.
yeah. John, this has been so rich. Thank you so much. And I want to direct people who want to find out about you. How would they go to learn more about your work and your writing?
Thank you, David. It's johnperkins.org basically has everything. The new book is not on there yet. It doesn't come out till September. I just finished writing it, but we're holding off until after the summer. The summer apparently, publishers say, is when everybody wants to read adventure stories and romance, and they get
Okay.
into they get into politics and heavy subjects in September, and it's an election year. So
Yeah.
that book is it's available for pre-sale without a cover. It doesn't We don't have a cover yet, I think, on Amazon or any place where people buy books. But most of all the information about me is on my website, and the new book will be up there soon, and all the trips and places. I'm lecturing at Princeton in 2 weeks, and then at a place in the Bahamas, and all that stuff is on my website.
John Perkins, thank you for being here.
My pleasure, David. Thank you for doing what you do. Keep it up. Get that word out there. Thank you very much for
I
doing it.
will. Well, my friends, that concludes this season of the How People Grow podcast. Wow, what a journey. If you haven't heard each episode, I invite you to go back and listen to each and every one. Each one is so rich with great insight. And for this last one, thank you to John Perkins for helping us see how we can change our dreams and find a new way to be. So stay tuned for the next season of the How People Grow podcast. It will be coming out in a few months. The next season is going to be about the inner work of becoming. And I've already queued up a lot of great interviews that are beginning to be recorded as we speak. So check back. In the meantime, you may get a bonus episode on what Indigenous wisdom has for us today. Thanks to all of our guests. If this podcast has been helpful to you, go check us out on Substack at the link in the show notes. Drop us a couple bucks a month. All the writing is free, but the few dollars helps us keep going and gets you in on a monthly conversation with like-minded people. So go check us out there. I look forward to interacting with you on Substack. If this has been helpful to you, you can also leave us a review. That's helpful. And share this podcast with a friend. Blessings to each and every one of you. We will see you soon. I hope sooner than later.